Time to make some gravy. It's kind of the mother sauce in the South. I was mentioning earlier that biscuits are poor people food, and gravy just helps extend some of that and make it a little bit better. In fact, you can eat a hubcap if you put enough gravy on it. This gravy, you know, it goes by the name of sausage gravy and white gravy, country gravy, lots of different names for it. And you have to start off by making a roux. Now, if you're making sausage, you fry the sausage first and you use the grease from the sausage, and then you add flour. I don't have any sausage this morning, so we're going to start off with about a tablespoon of flour, and you want to get that in there and mix it up. And it's important at this point to make sure that you let your flour cook, because otherwise it's going to have a taste of raw flour and it doesn't seem to work as well. And because of the amount of flour, I'm going to add a little bit more butter. You want to do this on medium heat. You don't want to burn the butter, you don't want to burn the flour. You just want to get them mixed together and incorporate so that the flour can cook. Now, for the milk part of this, we're just going to use whole milk. I recommend it. A lot of people have much lower fat milk, but I actually think that it works better with whole milk. I think that flour is just about cooked down to where it needs to be. Now we're going to pour in some milk. This is probably going to be, since it's only a couple people, about 2 cups, if that. So we'll start off with 1 cup of milk. Yeah, a little bit more. I'm going to add about another 3/4 of a cup. Now, I would caution you against the temptation to put in some milk and cook it, then decide that it's not enough and add more milk and cook that, and then add more milk later, because all of that does is tend to make it lumpy. So, I'm going to let this start cooking. I won't make you watch all of it. Use a rubber spatula, especially with a curved edge, so you can get up along the edge, because you want to keep this stirred and moving. And the last thing we want to do as it starts cooking is add pepper. And you're going to say, how much pepper? Well, a bunch. I don't know how else to describe it. Seems to make a big difference on the taste. And I want to keep this going. You want to bring it up certainly to a simmer to where you can see it bubbling on the edges. That way you know it's cooking. And the one thing I want you to pay attention to, so that you can tell how thick it's going to be, is right now when I go across the bottom, you notice that the milk completely fills in right behind the spatula. You can't ever see the bottom of the pan. Well, that means that it's certainly way too early. It's not gravy enough yet, and we'll check and see how that changes as this starts getting towards the end. Jump back in here. It is progressing nicely, and I wanted to show you the bubbling that's going on around the edge. And the reason that we keep taking off and scraping the bottom is because that helps add to the thickness of the gravy. And right now, as I scrape across the bottom, even though it's simmering nicely, you still see that there's gravy that goes right in behind it, and it doesn't allow us to see the bottom. So we'll check back in on this in a moment. Gravy's coming along nicely. You know, I mentioned that both my parents grew up on kind of blow-away farms in the Texas Panhandle during the Depression and Dust Bowl era, and things were hard. And my mother had polio as a girl, and I think that if you grew up dealing with polio and metal braces on your legs, kind of like you saw in Forrest Gump, and the difficulties living in that era and on such a ranch, you would understand her outlook on life. I think that was typified when I was young. I didn't realize that drinking glasses weren't supposed to have threads around the top of it until I think I was about 10, because we used mason jars. And not because it was trendy, it was just cheaper than trying to go out and buy glasses. Well, she started buying Welch's grape jelly that at the time, this is about 1962 or 3, started coming in containers or glasses that had Fred Flintstone on them, and they were collectible, so you could buy one, use it up, and use it as a glass. And I think that we had gone through about 3 or 4 of them. And sure enough, as a kid, I managed to, at the time, when I was about 8, I managed to break one of them. And she came in, and she didn't yell at me. She just looked pretty forlorn about it and said, "Well, I guess we just can't have nice things," which is surprising to hear today, but sort of typified how she looked at life sometimes. Now, as we're going across the edges, I can start to see the pan after I wipe the spatula by. I think you can see that pretty well over here. But it's not doing it in the middle yet, but it is getting thicker. And it tells me that we're getting just about to the point where it's going to be done. In fact, just then, you could start to see a little bit of the pan after I push the spatula by. And that'll be far more apparent here in about another 30 seconds. Also, adding to the thickness will be the fact that you take this off the heat and let it get cooler, and that will also thicken it. Now as I move the spatula, you can start to see the pan right behind it. Not a lot, but it's getting there. You can see the pan, and then it closes up as the gravy moves in over the top of it. There we go. Now we're getting just about to the right place. Now if you're going to be making biscuits and gravy, you make the biscuits, get them into the oven, and then while they're in the oven doing their thing, you have time to start making the gravy. And by the time you get the gravy done, you'll be pretty close to having the biscuits ready as well. Now you can see the pan as I move the spatula through there. So that tells me we're really just about at the point where this will be ready to come off of the stove. Start to cool down, and it will thicken up even more. I'll probably even add a little bit more pepper right at the end. Yeah, I think that we're pretty much to the right point. Now the gravy can go with everything, not just bread. At my house, we put gravy on everything. Sausage, eggs, toast, biscuits, didn't matter. If you had the gravy, you put it on it. And it's still one of the favorite things that I find. All right, I'm going to get the heat off this and get it up into a bowl and let it cool, and take a look and a taste test on those biscuits. Okay, we have a couple of hot biscuits now. Use a fork, help get those separated. Break it neatly in half. Same thing with the other. And they are ready for an application of gravy. Well, I hope you got some ideas out of this. Once you make the gravy, you could put it on top of eggs. You could chop up boiled eggs and make creamed eggs on toast. There's quite a few different things that you can do with it. And it takes a few minutes, but it's certainly filling and a lot cheaper, especially if you're having to cut back on food expenses these days, like pretty much everybody is. I hope you enjoyed that, and we'll see you on the next recipe. Thanks. God bless Texas.